The sharp clang of metal hitting the floor rang out through Harborview Square Mall like a gunshot. Everyone turned. A calm black woman stood at the center of a circle of suspicious eyes. In her hand was a brown handbag right in front of a glittering jewelry display. The store manager, a blonde woman in a white suit, snapped. She just put the bracelet in her bag. I saw it. The air froze. Two security guards in blue uniforms moved in their radios, crackling. They surrounded the woman as if detaining a dangerous criminal. But in her eyes there was no fear, only the quiet exhaustion and bitterness forged through years of endurance. Her name was Alicia Monroe, 38, a detective in the Harborview Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. It was her rare day off, and she only wanted to buy a birthday gift for her niece, Naomi. Moments earlier, Alicia had entered the store in a light mood. After weeks tracking a major money laundering ring, she just wanted to relax. Sunlight from the glass ceiling spilled across the marble floor, painting her face in a soft, golden glow. She chose a silver bracelet with an angel charm, exactly the kind Naomi loved. But as she leaned closer to inspect it, she caught a reflection in the display glass, a tall, tense security guard watching her. That familiar chill of being suspected crept under her skin. She tried to ignore it until she heard the faint click of a radio and a voice say clearly, "Target black female, brown bag, gray coat." In that instant, 2 decades in law enforcement flashed before her, countless moments watching innocent people accused simply for the color of their skin. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. The manager, Linda Moore, approached. "I'm sorry, but we need to check your bag." Her voice tried for professionalism, but her eyes betrayed contempt. Alicia answered evenly, "I haven't bought anything yet, and I haven't left the counter. If you're suspicious, you can check the cameras." Linda didn't listen. She turned toward the door, signaling the guards to come in. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a crew cut, stepped forward. "Name's Grant Hale, acting security supervisor. Open the bag now." His tone dripped with disdain. Alicia met his gaze, her voice calm and firm. "Do you have a search warrant?" Her composure made him hesitate. Then he sneered. "A warrant? Who do you think you are?" In that instant, he had no idea that question would become the biggest mistake of his life. A small crowd gathered. Phones were raised, recording the guards shouting at a black woman in the middle of the mall. Linda's voice rose above the noise. "She's been loitering here for ages without buying anything." Suspicious behavior, clearly. Grant grabbed his radio, requesting backup. Suspect is uncooperative. Alicia closed her eyes. She knew it had gone too far. She could have stopped it all right there. All she needed to do was pull out her badge and say one sentence. But her instincts as a detective told her to let them reveal the truth on their own. Sometimes justice needs evidence, and today maybe she was that evidence. Grant moved in his rough hand, clamping around her wrist. Cold metal brushed her skin. The crowd murmured. A man in a suit whispered to his friend. Unbelievable, some people still think they can steal in public. Alicia's phone buzzed in her pocket. Naomi was calling. She didn't answer. Not out of fear, but because she didn't want her niece to hear the sound of handcuffs closing around her wrists. "You're being detained on suspicion of theft," Grant announced loudly, trying to drown out the whispers. Alicia looked straight into the lenses of the recording phones, her voice steady, but cutting through the noise. "You're making a mistake, one that will follow you for the rest of your life." At that moment, the small body camera hidden inside her jacket pocket, an old habit from years on, the job was still rolling, capturing every look, every word, every movement. None of them knew that the woman being treated like a criminal was Detective Monroe of the Harborview Police Department, the same officer who had taken down a multi-million-dollar fraud ring and was about to expose an even greater injustice. Before Grant could drag her out of the store, Alicia glanced at the mirror and caught her own reflection, calm, composed, unshaken. No fear, no anger, only a cold, resolute determination. This time the truth would not be buried. Night rain poured down over Harborview as if trying to wash everything clean, but it couldn't erase the image of the handcuffed woman in the mall now flooding the internet. The clip was barely 3 minutes long, filmed from the opposite hallway, yet it was enough to ignite an entire city. The first headline, spreading across social media, read, "Off duty. Detective wrongfully arrested for theft nationwide. Outrage erupts." Alicia Monroe watched the footage again on the small screen of her phone inside the holding cell. The cold blue light illuminated her face, marked by faint abrasions from the steel cuffs. In the video, she appeared calm, almost defiant, while Grant Hale looked like a man flaunting power. Every frame was living proof of discrimination, of blatant racial profiling. Outside those walls, thousands were sharing the clip. The hashtags "Justice for Alicia," "False Arrest," and "Police Brutality" were everywhere. But inside the concrete room, there was no applause, no support, only the contemptuous glance of the duty officer and the ticking of the wall clock counting every minute. Alicia gave a bitter smile. She had sat in interrogation rooms many times before, but never on this side of the table. The door burst open. Rachel Kim entered, raincoat still dripping her face, a mix of anger and worry. "I'm late because they tried to stall the process," she said sharply. "You're not being charged, but they plan to hold you overnight. The reason, public disturbance." Alicia exhaled. "They don't want me going home while a video like that is humiliating the department." Rachel sat down, flipping through the case file. "Who signed the order to detain you?" "Grant Hale." Alicia replied coldly. "He claims I resisted when asked to open my bag, and I just heard he filed an official report saying I shoved a security officer." Rachel let out a short laugh, not from amusement, but fury. "That video's gone national. They can't rewrite the truth." Alicia met her eyes, her voice steady. "Rachel, you know how this system works. When power is threatened, it rewrites everything. And if I were just another black woman, I'd already be convicted." The narration shifted to Rachel's thoughts. She had defended dozens of wrongfully arrested clients and read hundreds of fabricated reports, but she had never seen anything this blatant. Alicia wasn't an ordinary citizen. She was a decorated detective who had cracked major financial crimes. If they could do this to her, how many others had been buried in silence? At dawn, Alicia was released. As the precinct doors opened, the cold morning air hit her face, but inside her was a storm. At the corner, reporters were already waiting. Camera flashes flared, and questions flew from every direction. "Detective Monroe, were you really arrested for theft? Are you planning to sue the police? Were you a victim of racial profiling?" Alicia didn't answer. She only said softly, just enough for the microphones to catch, "The truth always finds its way." When she arrived home, she saw Naomi curled up by the door, eyes red from staying up all night. "Are you okay, Auntie?" The question caught in her throat. Alicia hugged her exhaustion fading as one thought took hold. She could not stay silent. Meanwhile, across town, The emergency meeting room at Harborview Police Headquarters was lit up. Senior officers sat around the table, the air thick with tension. On the large screen, the video replayed on loop. Captain Victor Ross Alicia's direct superior tapped his fingers against the table. "This is worse than I thought. Every news outlet is covering it. We need to act now." Grant Hale stood at the head of the table, jaw clenched. "She was the one causing a scene, sir." "I followed protocol." Ross fixed him with a sharp stare. "Protocol. The entire country sees you as a racist." Grant gritted his teeth. "It's media exaggeration." She looked suspicious. "I did my job." Ross leaned back, his voice low. "She wasn't just a suspicious black woman. She's a detective from this department, and she had a body cam." The room fell silent. Grant froze. "She had a camera." Ross nodded slowly. "Old habit from the job." "And if that footage matches what's online, you won't just lose your badge, you'll face court." Across town, Alicia stood before her mirror, gently wiping the bruises on her wrists. Her reflection stared back with cold determination. Beside her, the phone buzzed. A text appeared anonymous. "Don't make this public. We know who you are." Alicia read the words, a faint smirk curling her lips. "Good," she whispered. "Then the game has already begun." Morning in Harborview was bright, but inside the police headquarters, the atmosphere felt like a storm, gathering the internal affairs conference room packed with people, a whiteboard plastered with headlines reading "False Arrest in Harborview Racial Profiling by Local Officer Detective, Detained by Her Own Department," each line cutting into the force's reputation. Alicia Monroe sat opposite three members of the Internal Investigation Panel, a glass of untouched water before her. Across the table, the lead investigator, a graying man named Keller, flipped through the file with an even unreadable voice. "Detective Monroe, according to the report, you refused to cooperate with security staff and caused a disturbance at the scene. Would you like to explain?" Alicia kept her tone steady. "I did not cause a disturbance. I asked them to check the cameras and they refused. I was handcuffed with no evidence of criminal behavior. I have served nearly 20 years. I know proper procedure." Keller lifted his eyes, narrowing them like a probe. "You carried a personal recording device. Regulations require off-duty recording to be reported in advance." Alicia smiled faintly, not exactly amused. "I always carry a mini body cam to document sudden scenes. It's a safety measure, not a weapon, and because of it, you will be able to see the whole truth." Keller nodded, made a note. "We will review it, but pending results, you are temporarily suspended." The words fell like a shot. Alicia showed no surprise. She had expected it. They needed a sacrificial piece to soothe public opinion, and she was perfect, both victim and internal insider. Walking out, she crossed the long corridor under the gaze of former colleagues, some averting their eyes, some offering a sympathetic nod, but no one dared speak. That silence inside those walls had been killing justice for years. In the parking lot, Rachel waited in a silver sedan. "I guess they suspended you," she asked, as Alicia opened the car door. "Yes," Alicia answered shortly. "But it's only temporary. They're stalling to bury things." Rachel looked at her friend, concern in her eyes. "Alicia, I just got word someone in internal finance leaked documents. It seems your superior, Captain Ross, is tied to a private security sponsorship fund called Civic Guard, the same company that provided the mall security that day." Alicia went still. That name had come up in money laundering probes before Civic Guard. She repeated slowly. "I thought they just supplied guards. They have financial links to the department." Rachel nodded. Records show they received sponsorship funds from a police fund to boost neighborhood security. But oddly, the money was routed through a chain of anonymous subsidiaries. Alicia leaned back, eyes narrowing. She recognized the scent of conspiracy corruption braided with power. She had exposed bigger frauds, but never where the puppeteer might be inside her own department. "Rachel," she said quietly, "can you trace that corporate chain? I'll try to access internal databases. They think suspension stops me. They forget. I know every path through this system." That afternoon, Alicia returned to her small bayside apartment, sunset spilling gold over the water, a cold light reflecting off the window. She opened her laptop and entered a special access code known only to the Financial Crimes Unit. Thousands of data points appeared. Transaction flows, contracts, transfers, hidden under community project names, and one name repeated: Victor Ross, his signature on approvals between Civic Guard and the police. Ross, the man who once called her the department's shining star, who had signed her commendation 2 years ago, might now be at the center of a budget manipulation and cover-up scheme. Her phone buzzed. Rachel texted, "I have what you need. Meet at the waterfront cafe tonight." Alicia closed the laptop, locked the door, and left a black SUV idled across the street. Inside, a man put the receiver to his mouth. "Target left home, report to Ross." That evening in the cafe by the pier, Alicia met Rachel. Her lawyer friend spread documents on the table and lowered her voice. "Here's proof of transfers from Civic Guard to an anonymous fund in the Caymans. Part of it routes back into personal accounts of several senior officers, including Ross." Alicia flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. My God! If this comes to light, it's not just racial discrimination, it's organized crime. Rachel gripped her hand, voice grave. "Alicia, be careful. If they were willing to fabricate charges against you, they're willing to do worse." Outside, the sea, howled wind, cutting in icy gusts. Alicia stared into the distance, a hard light in her eyes. They think they can scare me? No. From now on, I won't just defend, I will strike. From the shadows across the water, the SUV's lights flashed, then went dark. A low voice crackled on the tracker radio of the watcher. "She's getting suspicious. Keep distance, but don't let her be." Sea wind swept across the Harborview Pier, carrying the scent of salt and the distant sound of ship horns echoing through damp streets. The sun had just set, and the water shimmered with reflections from the financial district's lights, far away, a place that held more secrets than anyone dared imagine. In her 6th-floor apartment, Alicia Monroe stood by the window, quietly watching the black SUV that had been parked across the street for 2 hours. She knew she was being followed, but fear was now just an old reflex. The phone rang. "Eli Parker here." A young man's voice said, tense but steady. "I'm a reporter with the Harborview Chronicle. I'm investigating Civic Guard. Detective Monroe. I think we should talk." Alicia hesitated for a moment. "You know who I am?" "I know you're the only one in the department who ever audited the security budget," Eli said. "I also know you were suspended for refusing to stay silent. And I have documents proving Civic Guard isn't just a security company." Alicia turned toward the table, looking at the printed invoices scattered across it, all bearing Captain Ross's signature. "If you're telling the truth," she said slowly, "meet me tonight, Riverstone Cafe, 9 o'clock. And Eli, if this is a trap, you'll regret it." When Alicia arrived, Eli was already there, hair messy, a laptop, and a stack of old papers beside him. He looked younger than his reputation, but his eyes carried the weariness of someone who'd touched dangerous truths. "I got this data from an employee inside Civic Guard," he said. sliding a copy of a contract toward her. They signed an agreement with the police department to share profits from arrests. Every time mall security identifies a suspect, the department receives a bonus from Civic Guard labeled as a neighborhood safety incentive. Alicia flipped through the pages quickly, her heart pounding. So they turned arresting innocent people into a business model. Exactly, Eli nodded. And the victims are mostly people of color, over 80%. This is systemic racial profiling funded by money and power. His words took Alicia back to the morning's interrogation, where they questioned her like a criminal while they themselves sold justice for profit. Eli lowered his voice. I can publish this, but I need someone inside to verify authenticity. One word from you could bring that entire building down. Alicia leaned back, half her face caught in the warm glow of the cafe light. You don't understand, Eli. I was part of that system once. I know exactly how they react when someone threatens them. Eli smiled faintly, though his eyes were serious. I'm not afraid. I'm only afraid you'll stay silent. The words struck her deeply. Silence, that was what they always depended on. She had been silent for years, believing she could change things from within, but not anymore. That night, Alicia sent Rachel a copy of all the data she'd received. In the email, she wrote one short line, "If I disappear, make it public." The next morning, the Harborview Police Department was in chaos. Eli Parker's articles exploded across the front pages: Profit Network behind false arrests, Civic Guard, and Police Department, an alliance in the shadows. Beneath every story were thousands of furious comments. Justice for Monroe, stop racial profiling. This is corruption. In the main office, Captain Ross slammed the newspaper onto his desk, his voice tight with rage. Find who leaked this and keep eyes on Monroe. Grant Hale stood near the door, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. If she's working with the press, I can handle it my way. An accident, maybe. Ross shot him a thin, cutting smile. No, Grant. No accidents now. We'll let the law take care of her. A fake indictment planted evidence, and justice will twist itself. That afternoon, Alicia received a summons. She was accused of unauthorized access to internal data and leaking classified information. She chuckled softly as she read it, charges written by the very people she was exposing. Rachel appeared at the door, her face pale. Alicia, they're trying to turn you into a criminal. I heard they'll request a warrant for your arrest tomorrow. Alicia walked to the window, looking down at the crowd below. Rachel, do you know what I believe? Sometimes justice has to be cornered before it fights back. Night fell, swallowing Harborview in silence. Meanwhile, on the 10th floor of Civic Guard headquarters, Victor Ross stood by his window phone in hand. Stay in touch with our people inside the department, he said quietly. Monroe is becoming dangerous. If she keeps digging, she'll bring down all of us and those who fund us. Across town, Alicia locked her apartment door, set her handgun on the table, and opened the video file from her body cam, the footage of Grant Hale slamming her to the ground, the laughter around her echoing like it was yesterday. She slowed the playback, stopping on the final frame, the face of Linda Moore, the store manager, looking toward the doorway, signaling to someone out of frame. Alicia zoomed in. Reflected in the glass was the faint image of a man in a dark suit, wearing a police badge, Victor Ross. She sat still for a long moment, no doubt left in her mind. The wrongful arrest, the smear campaign, all of it had been a calculated plan, orchestrated by her own superior. She whispered to herself, calm but cold. All right, Captain. Now, the real game begins. The next morning, rain veiled the Harborview docks in a silvery haze. The streets shimmered with scattered red lights reflected on the gray water. Inside her silent apartment, Alicia Monroe sat at her desk, papers and printed data spread across every inch. Every line, every number felt like a bone in the skeleton of the monster she was about to face. The phone rang. It was Rachel. Bad news. The arrest warrant's been signed. They could come any minute. Alicia rose, her voice low and steady, almost cold. Then I won't run, but I won't let them take me without knowing what I'm holding. She inserted a USB drive containing all the copied data into her laptop and sent it to a secure overseas mailbox one Eli could access if she disappeared. She had just pressed send when the knock came. 5 sharp raps, firm and deliberate. Not a visitor, not a neighbor. Grant Hale appeared with 2 other officers. His face no longer carried its usual arrogance, but the flat look of someone assigned to do something dirty. Detective Monroe. He said, his voice damp from the rain. You're under arrest for accessing the police department's network and leaking classified material. Alicia looked straight into his eyes. Another fabrication, Grant. How many times will you twist justice to protect Ross? He said, nothing. Only gestured. The cold metal of the cuffs clicked around her wrists, but this time her eyes held no defeat, only a silent challenge. At the station, the interrogation room was staged like a performance. On the table sat a pre-written report. Grant faced her across the light that cut his face in half shadow, consuming the rest. Do you admit to sending internal information to reporter Eli Parker? No, Alicia replied flatly. You don't admit it, fine. We have proof text messages between you and Parker. Alicia tilted her head, a faint smile forming. Are you sure you know where my phone is? Grant frowned. What are you talking about? That phone is with someone you wouldn't dare touch, attorney Rachel Kim. Everything's backed up, including the message where you ordered your team to keep eyes on Monroe. Want me to quote it? His grip on the pen tightened, fear flickering in his eyes before he forced a laugh. You think your word means anything? The whole system will turn its back on you. Alicia leaned back. Then let's see who turns first. At that moment, the door burst open. A man in a dark suit stepped in flashing a prosecutor's badge. His voice was firm and calm. Detective Monroe is to be released. The evidence for data intrusion is insufficient, and Grant Hale, you will hand over all case files to the prosecutor's office immediately. Grant stood face pale. You have no authority to interfere with internal we do, the man interrupted, raising a court order signed by the state. Because this is no longer an internal matter. It's now a criminal investigation into Civic Guard. Alicia rose, slowly removing the cuffs from her wrists. Grant watched her lips pressed tight, hands trembling. Outside, the rain poured harder. Rachel waited by the car, tossing her a dry coat. Eli sent me new footage, she said quietly as the car rolled forward. It's from a Civic Guard employee. He says there's a camera inside their boardroom. The night before your arrest, Captain Ross met with the management team and ordered them to find an example to intimidate the media. And Linda Moore, the store manager, was chosen to set up the act. Alicia went silent, watching the rain streak down the glass. So I was the bait, Rachel nodded, and they filmed the entire meeting. Alicia gave a dry laugh. Well, looks like justice just gained another camera. That night in Eli Parker's apartment, the glow of his laptop lit faces worn but burning with resolve. Alicia, Rachel, and Eli sat around the table, thick files between them. What do we have? Alicia asked. Eli pointed to the screen. The internal video confirms Ross ordered the staged arrest, and this he opened another file shows Civic Guard's money flow into a secret fund under Ross's name and 2 city council members. Rachel cut in. "We won't go public yet. I'll submit everything at the hearing next week. There'll be law press and live cameras. They won't be able to deny it." Alicia nodded, her eyes sharp. "Good. But before that, I want to know everything, everyone involved, everyone silent, everyone who benefited." Eli scrolled and the names appeared. Victor Ross, Linda Moore, Grant Hale, and a few from within the department, among them Lieutenant Harris, the man who once defended her like a brother. Alicia sat still, heart-heavy. Harris, too. Rachel placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know it's hard to believe, but data doesn't lie." Alicia nodded, faintly, her voice rough. "Then there's nothing left to lose." She looked at the screen, at the bold title, Harborview Corruption Network. "Tomorrow I'm meeting someone. If I'm right, he's the one holding the door to this hell." Outside, thunder rolled over the bay, long and low like a warning. But inside that small room, only the sound of steady heartbeats remained. Alicia knew from this moment on there was no turning back. Dawn, over Harbor View, was cold and gray, the weak sunlight struggling to pierce the heavy fog that blanketed the bay. Alicia Monroe left her apartment while the city was still half asleep. In her hand was a black leather bag not filled with weapons, but with documents powerful enough to bring down an entire system. She was meeting one person, Lieutenant Mark Harris, at a small diner by the road, the same place they had shared morning coffee for nearly 10 years. The man who once called her his most trusted partner. The diner was nearly empty, filled only with the smell of coffee and baked bread. Harris sat in the back corner, calm as ever, the same familiar smile on his face. But Alicia knew that smile was a mask now. "Haven't seen you out of hiding for a while," Harris said with a half-joking tone. "I heard about your situation. A shame, really. Just one big misunderstanding." Alicia sat down, her gaze steady. "A misunderstanding? Then how do you explain my name being used as an example in the Civic Guard meeting you attended?" Harris raised an eyebrow, concealing a brief flicker of surprise. "Who told you that?" "The internal video," Alicia replied. "Ross, you, Grant Hale, Linda Moore, you were all there?" "I've seen it." Her voice was low, but sharp as a blade. Harris set his coffee cup down, leaning slightly forward. "Alicia, I don't want this to get ugly. You're going up against people you can't beat. You think you're fighting for justice, but you're digging your own grave." "You're right," she said evenly, meeting his gaze. "I can't win if I fight alone. But luckily this time, I'm not alone." Harris smiled again, but uneasily now. "You've changed. You used to know the rules. You used to know when to stay quiet. And that's exactly why I'm here to stop staying quiet." Harris sighed and pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Ross knows you won't stop. He told me to deliver a message. If you hand over all the documents, he'll make sure you're safe. A transfer, a clean record, your pension intact. No one touches you or your niece." The mention of Naomi's name made Alicia's fists tighten. "They're threatening my family now." "Not a threat," Harris murmured, avoiding her eyes. "A last chance." Alicia stood, her voice calm but trembling with fury. "Thank you, Mark. But the only chance I need is to expose them." She walked away, leaving Harris alone in the quiet diner, his hand trembling beside a cup of cold coffee. That afternoon, Alicia met Eli and Rachel again at the small apartment by the docks. Eli had news. Civic Guard is wiping everything. Internal servers erased, files burned. They know we're about to strike. Rachel threw a folder onto the table. We still have the copies. But to go public, we need confirmation from someone inside a sworn statement. Eli turned to Alicia. There's one man, a security engineer named Brandon Lee. He's the one who sent me the meeting footage. But now he's gone. I think they found him. No, Alicia said firmly. They won't get to him first, I will. That night, she drove to the industrial district where Civic Guard's old building sat silent and decaying. A faint light glowed on the ground floor. She moved slowly, gun in hand, her palms slick with sweat. The door was unlocked. When she pushed it open, the hinges groaned softly in the dark. The hallway smelled of chemicals and burnt wiring. Computers were dismantled, file cabinets charred. In the middle of the wreckage lay a body. Alicia knelt and turned the man over. Brandon Lee. He was still breathing faintly, blood staining his lips. Ross, he whispered, he knew I was meeting you. The data in the hard drive surveillance room. Alicia gripped his hand. Hold on, Brandon. I'll be back. She ran upstairs, kicking open the door to the surveillance room. The main servers were wiped, but in the corner, a small drive blinked green. She pulled it free and slipped it into her jacket. On the floor lay a half-burned document, bold letters across the top, Civic Guard Quarterly. Targets increased detentions by 15%. In that instant, everything became clear. Every arrest of a black citizen had not been random. It was a business metric, a profit goal for the entire system. When Alicia returned, Brandon was gone. She stood in the dark room as wind rushed through the broken windows, scattering the document across the floor until it struck her boot. Each printed word cut like a blade. She stepped outside just as the rain came pouring down, punishing and relentless. In the flash of lightning, she saw the black SUV parked nearby. Grant Hale stepped out, gun in hand. It ends here, Monroe. Perfect timing, she said evenly. I just found a gift for justice. Grant moved closer, gun aimed at her chest. Justice. You think justice exists in this city? We're all just tools. The difference is you forgot how to survive. Alicia closed her eyes briefly, her hands still gripping the hard drive inside her coat. No Grant. I just chose not to die a coward. Sirens echoed in the distance. Grant turned his head, hesitating for just a second, enough for Alicia to draw her gun and shoot him in the shoulder. He fell with a cry that was swallowed by the rain. She didn't stop. She ran straight toward the flashing lights, holding the hard drive high. Two officers jumped from their car, one recognizing her instantly, Detective Monroe. She nodded, panting. Evidence, it's all here. There's a man inside, still alive. They tried to silence him. Chaos unfolded under the glare of red and blue lights. As they carried Grant and Brandon's body away, Alicia stood motionless in the downpour. Lightning split the sky over Harbor View, illuminating her face, calm, cold, and unyielding. In that moment, Alicia knew the real war had only begun, and this time she held the one thing Victor Ross and Civic Guard feared most: undeniable proof. The sky over Harbor View was gray. The rain had stopped, but the scent of smoke and metal still lingered on the wet streets. Alicia Monroe sat in Rachel's small office, her coat stained with mud, her hands trembling from cold and exhaustion. On the desk, the hard drive she had taken from the Civic Guard building was connected to a computer, the screen flashing the words, "Decrypting files 72%. Rachel looked at her voice, tight with emotion. Do you realize how much you just risked? Alicia Brandon's dead and Grant's in the hospital? They're going to use that to charge you with assaulting an officer. Alicia leaned back in her chair, eyes distant. If I have to choose between saving my own life and exposing the truth, I'll choose the truth. Brandon died, leaving behind what he believed in. I won't let that vanish for nothing. Eli Parker, sitting in the corner, spoke as he typed furiously on his laptop phone, pressed to his ear. I just got word from the department. Ross called an emergency meeting. He's planning to announce that you're part of a conspiracy to sabotage the Harborview Police Department. They're painting you as a spy hired by anti-police groups. Rachel slammed her hand on the table, her voice filled with outrage. Unbelievable! They dare pull that after the entire city saw the footage of your arrest. Eli sighed. You know how it works. When the system controls the narrative, they can turn victims into traitors. Alicia rose and walked to the window. Outside, the Harborview Bay was calm, the surface swallowed by mist. She stared at her own reflection in the glass, dark circles under her eyes, a look no longer soft but hardened. If they want to fight with lies, I'll answer with the truth. How long until the files finish decrypting? About 2 hours, Eli replied. But I've already seen a few files. There are emails between Ross Hale and Linda Moore discussing the quarterly arrest quotas. They even use the term racial profiling strategy as if it were a business plan. Rachel stood up, pacing. We need to send this straight to the state court. And I want everything backed up in multiple copies in case anything happens. Eli nodded. I'll send encrypted versions to 3 separate locations, including an international archive. If Ross tries to erase anything, it'll all go public automatically. Alicia gave a faint smile. Good Eli. For the first time, I've met a journalist who isn't afraid to wade through the mud. A knock came at the door. Rachel frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. Alicia signaled for silence, pulling her gun from her jacket. The door creaked open. A thin man in a dark shirt stepped in his face, gaunt eyes sunken, but he wasn't an enemy. My name is Jerome Whitaker, he said quietly. I used to work for Civic Guard. I saw your article, Mr. Parker. I came because I can't live with it anymore. The 3 exchanged glances. Alicia lowered her weapon and gestured for him to sit. Tell us, Mr. Whitaker. What do you know? The man's hands trembled as he opened an old briefcase, revealing a stack of printed documents. I worked in internal surveillance. Civic Guard ran 2 camera systems, one for official reports, another for private tracking. They recorded arrests to calculate bonuses for officers who were productive. I copied some of that data before they fired me. Alicia flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning rapidly. Each sheet showed images, charts, lists of detainees, most of them black or Latino. They really turned wrongful arrests into a profit machine, she murmured. It's worse than that, Jerome said softly. Civic Guard didn't just split profits with the police. They also funneled money into a youth training fund under Ross's name. On paper, it's a community initiative, but in reality, it's a laundering account. Eli turned to Rachel, his voice shaking with excitement. If we verify this, it's a state-level corruption case. They won't be able to hide anymore. Alicia nodded, eyes lighting up. Jerome, will you testify? The man was silent for a long moment, then said quietly, I'm terrified, Detective, but fear won't save anyone. If you stand up, I'll stand beside you. The door closed behind him as he left. Outside, the wind was rising again. Alicia looked out toward the Civic Guard building in the distance, its red lights blinking faintly. She knew they were meeting, preparing to strike back, but she also knew Ross was starting to lose control. Eli spoke softly. Tomorrow's the public hearing at City Hall. If you're going to turn this around, that's your only chance. Alicia turned her gaze sharp as glass. Tomorrow they'll hear the truth, not just about Civic Guard, but about this entire department. I'll say what everyone's afraid to say: justice has been sold. Rachel placed a hand on her shoulder. Remember, Alicia, after tomorrow, nothing will ever be the same. You're right, Alicia said, her tone calm but resolute. After tomorrow, Harborview will never be quiet again. That night she returned to her apartment, leaving the lights off. On the table lay her old police badge beside a photo of Naomi's bright smile. She brushed her fingers over the glass and whispered, "If I lose, remember, this never. Stay silent. Naomi." Never. Outside, a car engine started and drove off, its red taillights sliding past her window. Alicia didn't know if it belonged to an enemy or an ally, and she no longer cared. She had chosen her path. The path only those who dared to touch the truth would ever understand, and who knew the price it demanded. The morning sun broke through the thick gray clouds, casting a faint beam of light over Harborview City Hall, a fragile glimmer of hope. Outside, hundreds had gathered since dawn, holding banners and hastily painted signs that read, "Justice for Monroe End, police corruption, no more racial profiling." The air trembled with chants, car horns, and the shouts of reporters calling to one another, a tidal wave of noise rolling toward the steps of the building. Inside a small room behind the main hall, Alicia Monroe adjusted the old black vest she once wore with pride, fastening the captain's badge that had been stripped from her weeks earlier. Rachel reviewed the speech one last time, while Eli Parker fixed the small camera on his shoulder. No one spoke. Only the ticking of the clock filled the silence. Alicia stared at herself in the mirror, her eyes hollow, yet burning bright not with pride, but with conviction, the kind she had once lost. "It's time," Rachel said softly. "Once you walk out there, there's no going back." Alicia nodded. "If I turn back now, justice will never move forward." The door opened. The crowd in the chamber rose to its feet as she entered. Television cameras swung in unison, flashes burst like lightning. At the head of the hall, Mayor Thompson sat between the council members, and beside him, Captain Victor Ross. His face composed, expression unreadable, but his eyes betrayed the strain he tried to hide. When her name was announced, Alicia stepped to the podium. The air grew heavy. "I am Detective Alicia Monroe." She began, her voice steady and clear. "And 2 weeks ago, I was arrested at the Harborview Mall for a crime I did not commit. But this story is not just about me. It's about a system, a network that turned justice into a business." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Ross shifted uneasily, his face beginning to harden. Alicia opened her case and lifted the hard drive, the same one she had saved from Civic Guard's burning office. "Everything is here. Proof that Captain Ross, in collaboration with Civic Guard, orchestrated false arrests, coerced confessions, and profited from private probation programs." Mayor Thompson frowned, ready to interrupt, but scattered applause began from the back rows, swelling quickly until the entire hall was clapping. Alicia's voice grew stronger. Every arrest came with a quota. They called it a community protection strategy, but in internal reports it had other names: target by race, target by quota. That means people like me, black citizens, were reduced to numbers, to profit margins. Eli's camera captured every flicker of emotion. In the front row, Grant Hale, arm in a sling, lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. Civic Guard shared its profits with officers. The money was laundered through a fake charity fund controlled by Ross. "I have the emails, the payrolls. The recordings of their secret meetings. She paused, sweeping her gaze across the chamber. And I have a witness. Mr. Jerome Whitaker, former Civic Guard officer, is seated right behind you. Flashes erupted. The room turned. The frail man stood, his hands trembling, but his voice clear. Everything she says is true, he declared. I was there. I took bonuses when innocent people were arrested. I can't stay silent any longer. The room exploded in noise. Some council members stood in shock, but when Alicia raised her hand, silence returned. She opened her laptop and projected a video onto the giant screen. The footage showed Captain Ross standing in a Civic Guard conference room, his voice cold and deliberate. We need an example. One arrest big enough to remind the public that this system still controls the narrative. Find someone black with some visibility, someone who'll draw attention. The moment his words ended, chaos erupted. Reporters rushed to the exits to break the story. People shouted. Others gasped. Ross turned pale, trying to regain control. That's fabricated, he shouted, but no one listened. Just then, 2 officers from the state prosecutor's office entered and walked to the stage. One of them held up her badge. I am Deputy Prosecutor Patricia Walsh. Based on the evidence presented here, Captain Victor Ross is ordered to surrender his weapon and badge. He is under investigation for corruption evidence, tampering, and obstruction of justice. Ross froze, his face flushing red. He turned to Mayor Thompson for support, but the mayor only bowed his head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Alicia stepped back as the officers approached cameras, zooming in to capture the moment. The lens caught every detail, the shaking hands, the metallic glint of Ross's badge as it was removed from his chest. You don't understand, he shouted. I did this to protect the system. Alicia's reply was calm, but cut through the room like thunder. No, Ross. You did it to protect your wallet. The hall erupted into applause. People rose to their feet, chanting as one voice, Justice, justice for Monroe. In the crowd, Eli kept filming, tears rolling down his face without him noticing. Rachel stood at the back, her trembling smile illuminated by camera flashes. As officers led Ross away, Alicia stepped down from the podium, her legs suddenly light. Sunlight from the skylight above reflected off the badge in her hand, glimmering like a promise, fulfilled a reminder that justice, no matter how buried, always finds its way back. Outside, the chants continued, drums and cheers merging into one powerful, beautiful sound. Alicia stopped at the doorway, turning for a final look at the hall behind her, the place where the truth had finally been spoken. Harborview will never be the same again, she whispered. And that's exactly how it should be. 3 days later, Harborview felt reborn. News about the Civic Guard scandal flooded every channel, and the image of Captain Ross in handcuffs played on national television in an endless loop. The public was ablaze with outrage and admiration, while human rights organizations issued statements of gratitude to Detective Monroe, the woman who broke the silence. But amid the storm of praise, Alicia lived quietly in her small apartment by the bay, far from cameras and reporters. She sought no glory, only the simple return of normalcy. That afternoon, Naomi came to visit, holding up her phone with a bright smile. "Look at this, Auntie," she said proudly. "At school, they're teaching about the Civic Guard case in our social ethics class." "Everyone knows you changed the city." Alicia chuckled, warmth spreading through her chest. "I didn't change the city, Naomi," she said softly. "I just made it look in the mirror." On the television, a reporter covered the reopening of the Harborview Mall. The glass entrance where Alicia had once been handcuffed now displayed a new sign: Harborview Mall under new management. Crowds gathered outside, chanting "No more injustice." When the broadcast shifted to another story, Alicia turned off the TV and stepped onto the balcony. The breeze from the bay carried the scent of salt and the soft murmur of waves. Below, people walked and laughed, their faces no longer shadowed by suspicion. She touched the police badge that had been returned to her, the metal gleam reflecting faintly across her face. Justice isn't a victory, she whispered to herself. It's a journey, and everyone has to walk their part. Naomi slipped her small hand into her aunt's and smiled. "You took the first step so we'd know which way to go." Alicia nodded gently, her eyes drifting toward the horizon, where the setting sun painted the water in hues of gold and crimson. For the first time in months, peace finally settled within her. Late in the afternoon, the golden light of sunset stretched across Harborview Bay, reflecting on the calm surface like a soft balm, soothing the city's still healing wounds. 3 days had passed since the public hearing, and Harborview had changed. News of the Civic Guard scandal still filled every front page, and people spoke about it everywhere, from cafes to buses. But in her small apartment by the bay, Alicia Monroe chose silence. She brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the streets below come alive again. For the first time in months, she could hear laughter from passers-by without the sting of suspicion in it. Naomi came to visit holding a small bouquet of flowers. "Auntie," she said gently, "at school they told your story. In our civics class. The teacher said you brought justice back to this city." Alicia smiled softly and brushed her niece's hair. "No, Naomi. I didn't bring justice back. I just reminded everyone that it was never gone. It was only hidden by those in power." That afternoon, Alicia decided to return to where everything began, the Harborview Mall. The road leading there was the same, but the scene had changed. Above the main entrance hung a new poster: Harborview Mall, a place of renewal. Security guards in fresh uniforms greeted visitors warmly. There were no suspicious glances anymore, no cautious footsteps following behind. When Alicia entered, people recognized her. Some clapped softly, others simply smiled, not loudly, but sincerely. The new manager, a young Latina woman, came out to greet her. "Detective Monroe, it's an honor to meet you. We have something to show you." She led Alicia to the central atrium, where a large photograph hung an image of Alicia the day she was handcuffed. Under the gentle light, her face in the photo was not fearful, but calm, proud, unbroken. Beneath it, a single line was written: "The day justice woke up." Alicia stood there for a long time, staring at the reflection of her past self. The anger and humiliation that had once consumed her now settled into quiet peace. She touched the glass lightly and whispered, "No justice ever wakes up unless someone dares to awaken it." As she stepped out of the mall, the wind from the bay rose strong, carrying with it the voices of the crowd in the distance, shouting, "No more corruption, justice for all." She stopped and saw Eli Parker interviewing citizens, his camera capturing every testimony about the city's transformation. Nearby, Rachel smiled and raised her hand, signaling that everything was finally all right. When night fell, Alicia and Naomi walked along the harbor. The reflections of city lights shimmered on the water like 1,000 tiny stars. Naomi held her aunt's hand, her voice full of pride. "You know what auntie people online are calling Harborview the City of Hope? Alicia gazed toward the distant lighthouses flickering through the mist and replied softly, "Not the city of hope, Naomi. The city of memory. Because if we forget the darkness, the light will never have meaning." Naomi was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Then I won't forget. I'll tell this story to everyone I can." Alicia smiled, her eyes warm, yet deep. "Good. Because justice only lives when it's remembered. And when one person speaks up, hundreds more will find the courage not to stay silent." She looked up at the sky now, glowing with the lights of the city, a place once known for its injustice, now a testament to courage. In the gentle sound of the waves, Alicia clasped the police badge that had been returned to her, the metal glint reflecting in her eyes. "Justice," she whispered, "has no color. It only needs a heart brave enough to keep it alive." Harborview slowly faded into the night, but within Alicia, another dawn had already begun.